Okay. I would like to welcome everybody to today's Flood News at Noon. Our speaker today is someone who everyone seems to enjoy whenever he's on, and that's Mr. Erik Moore. Erik Moore is a professional engineer licensed in 44 states and the District of Columbia. He graduated from Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology in Terre Haute, Indiana, with a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering. He has worked for Indiana and Pennsylvania Departments of Transportation, designing, building, and maintaining bridges and highways. As a structural designer with a structural consulting firm in Pennsylvania, he designed and/or supervised the construction of schools, hospitals, and general aviation facilities. Currently, he is employed as a senior engineer with EFI Global in Pensacola, Florida. Erik serves as the National Flood Manager and oversees engineering flood assignments throughout the United States. Since 2007, he has completed assignments in construction defect analysis, damage causation, collapse evaluation, building envelope investigations, commercial and residential roofing, foundation settlement issues, as well as damage evaluations resulting from storm forces to determine effects of high winds and storm surge on residential and commercial structures. In his free time, Erik enjoys traveling throughout the world with his beautiful wife Kelly and their wonderful son Nick. He enjoys hunting and fishing, as well as outdoor photography and following his son's budding football career. Please welcome Mr. Erik Moore.
So so before we get started here, we're going to do things a little differently today. Today is not really about a presentation. Today we're going to take a different approach, and instead of having that presentation, we're actually going to discuss a specific topic that we wanted to hear from an expert in the field of engineering. It's going to be more of a question and answer session today. And we've had some questions generated and sent to us, and we're going to take a look at those. But we really want to get that perspective on how we can help make the process easier to manage, the reporting process from the field to the engineer. Easier to manage, make it simplified, make it faster. We are a united front out there in the claims process, and though it's not often we really engage the services of an engineer, we should work with that engineer as if it's an everyday event that we're dealing with. The information we gather as adjusters out in the field during the scope and the rapidness of reporting this information is valuable to all parties involved, especially on the engineering side. Now, the longer we delay information or don't get that information off, or even get the correct information off, then that causes issues with the reporting side. So we have a question and answer session today. Erik is going to give us his insight into how we can all work together better, faster. I have some questions we generated. And normally we would have Erik and I actually on screen so we could kind of have a dialogue back and forth, have communication. But unfortunately, like with all technology, there was a little bit of technical issues on Erik's side. And so today we only have him on a call. But with that, Erik, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. So, all right. So, like I said, we have some questions that have been brought to us, and if you're ready, let's get started. So one of the first questions that was asked to us was, when should the adjuster request an expert? And this kind of seems like maybe a simple question and something that we commonly should know. But from your perspective, tell us when should the adjuster request an expert and kind of why?
Well, normally I would say that the easy answer and the short answer to that question is as soon as possible. Because just like with you all, the faster we get out to the site, the sooner we get out to the site, the more physical evidence we can capture via photographs, measurements, and we can see the damage in real time versus trying to piece it together 3, 4, 5, 6 months later from a myriad of foggy photographs or, kind of inadequate photographs. And we're kind of making some guesses and kind of tripping over ourselves trying to put the thing back together. The long answer would be more, if you see any kind of structural damage, a different type of construction, a different kind of if you're confused on maybe the repair methods, we get into a lot of that kind of information with, well, how do I fix this metal building versus just cleaning, or if it's not sheetrock, they actually have stucco on the interior, and what do we do with that? Any kind of code issues that you might run across. I know recently with Sally, the Florida building code changed in the middle of dealing with Sally. So as of January 1st, there are a lot of new code changes that have taken effect that have confused a lot of people. And a lot of our clients are frustrated with the fact that, well, we did estimates back in 2020 that now are going up in price because of code changes after the 1st of January that are going to affect pricing and different items that they weren't expecting. So I would say anytime that you see a structural issue, a building code related issue, a complicated repair issue, but as soon as possible, we should get out there. That will enable us to help you better and be able to provide more details rather than, well, it could have been this, but we're not sure because it's already been fixed or torn down or hauled away or something like that.
Which really makes perfect sense when you look at it, from our as well. There's some, we mute somebody, apologize for that. Just FYI, please make sure if you're not one of the speakers that when you come in, you mute. We appreciate it. So, yeah, it makes a lot of sense from the perspective of an adjuster. When we're out there in the field, there's things we have to do and there's things we're looking at. And if the longer we delay it, obviously there's issues that evolve from that. And that kind of leads me to the next question. From an adjuster, from your perspective and your expertise out there, what information do you need from the adjuster in order to do your job? Because, like we pointed out, we're out there, we're looking, and sometimes we're out there, weeks at a time, way before an expert gets called into it, which shouldn't happen. But we're out there an extended period of time, and, obviously the longer damages sit, the more exposure they have, the more issue they have. And I think it probably makes it a little more difficult and more challenging from an expert point of view. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but an expert point of view, to be able to pull that information together. The faster we get out there, the faster we see it, the faster we get this information to you, and makes your job easier. So the question that I have is, what information do you need from an adjuster when they're out there doing their scope, besides the normal stuff? What would you like to see from an adjuster? What would be beneficial to you?
Well, normally when we get the information or the assignment sent to us from the adjuster, a lot of times what we get is a very broad scope. And by broad, I mean as few as words as possible. A lot of the Sally claims that came in were determine the storm damage. Well, that's a pretty broad scope. Is there something specific you want us to look at? Is there a particular item you want us to address? The more detail you can provide on the scope. Now, I understand it's a fine line. You don't want to lead the expert too far, but a little bit of information goes a long way. If you have a roof problem that you want us to investigate, telling us about the pitch of the roof or how many stories the roof is or how to access the roof is helpful. A lot of job scopes I get are roof investigation. Well, is that a 3-story elevated roof down at the beach with no access for a ladder and I need a lift? Or is that something where there's a balcony on the second floor that I can throw a smaller ladder on to access the roof? Those kind of things are helpful. The biggest thing that I can think of is give us a picture of the front of the house when you pull up to it. A lot of times, particularly in a cat situation, we get sent a random address in a strange town that's been devastated by, you pick the event, flood, hurricane, tornado, what have you. There are no street signs. There's very few mailboxes. Most places, unless it's in a subdivision with an HOA that requires you to put a number on the building, it's not there. Or in some cases, the building's not there. So we're going by GPS, and GPS gets you within 30 to 50 feet, but it's helpful to know that we're looking at the same debris pile that y'all were looking at. I've had that happen in quite a few instances in Oklahoma City after the tornado a few years ago, in Sandy after that storm. my guys went out, they get an address. There's nothing left but random piles of debris. We've never been there before. And they looked at the wrong pile of debris. So that would help, just so we have the same perspective from the street, and the front for us would be whatever the address is labeled. If you've got a house that's on the east elevation is Main Street and the south elevation is First Street, if it's Main Street address, it would be that east elevation is the front. It's going to be, the front is whatever the emergency vehicles are going to show, they're going to see when they pull into the driveway for a call. I get a lot of complaints about, well, it's a waterfront house. The water side is the front side. Well, unless the fire truck and the ambulance are coming by sea, no, it's not. It's going to be whatever the EMS sees when they pull up. And that's the best way I can say to describe the front, just so we're on the same page. Because especially in a cat situation, I'm seeing a small percentage of what y'all are seeing. So the less times we have to communicate and ask questions, the better it is for everybody. Okay, which is great advice. And that's one thing you talked about earlier is the broad statement as well. Because unless we step back, you can't. We're out there, we see it, and we're seeing the house. We definitely need to make sure we're providing that information to you, so that or go. But then you have a situation. So when you talk about the damages, and we're reporting this back to you, and we're looking at stuff. You mentioned something about the broad description. We don't want to go too far and say there's flood damages to the foundation structure. Please investigate, because we're not the expert out there. We're not looking at that. So where's the fine line between saying there's damages and then there's flood damages to the structure? Where would the fine line be? What would be beneficial to see on a report besides the photos and besides it's a single story house, blue shutters, et cetera. But give us an example of what you'd like to see on a description of the damages. Well, for instance, if you got a call about, say, a wind burst surge, we had both of them at the house, decipher between the two. If there's a water line that you see at the site, let us know. Hey, we saw a water line of 2 inches in the lower level, or we saw a water line of 6 feet on the second floor. That'll give us some idea of what we're getting into. I've had some where the scope of work is water damage. Well, that doesn't help me very much. Is that a shower pan leak in the second floor shower? Is that a roof damage issue on a 3-story building that I'm going to need a lift to access? That little bit of information will help me look better showing up so that I've got the right tools for the job, because a lot of the specialized tools we don't carry all the time. Not everybody has a high quality infrared camera or plumbing devices to plug up the showers, or a bore scope to get into the wall cavity. So having an idea of what we're going after in the beginning helps the engineer plan and make sure that he or she brings the proper tools to the job and isn't stuck short-handed, like, oh, I needed a wrench, but I only have a hammer. What am I going to do?
Gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot of sense, because we get to that. We're getting up that fine line, but explaining what you will possibly be experiencing out there and what tools you need out there. But we're not crossing that threshold where we're saying, here's what the damage is from. As long as we don't cross that threshold, that's not our duty out there at that point. That's your job at that point. We're just giving you all the tools in order to be able to give us that assessment once you get out there. We may see structural damages. We may see cracks in drywall and cracks in structural issues and things like that. And there's a reason why we're sending you out there, so you can determine what is it that's from. Is it from wind? Is it from flood? What the termination is. Well, right. As adjusters, what we have to avoid doing is go out there saying the damages are from flood. There's cracks in the walls from flood. Please inspect, because again, we're not the experts. Which leads me to another question that was brought up. So we were talking about the wind versus flood. The risk is gone. There's obviously wind damage, or there's obviously damage from wind and flood. We're dealing with a hurricane. Shouldn't say obviously wind damage, because again, I'm not the expert out there at that time on the wind claim. I'm just on the flood claim. That's a different story and a different situation. But so you go out there, Jester walks out there, the house is completely gone. And there was a hurricane. Take Hurricane Michael, for example. House is gone. So from your perspective, we call in an engineer, we say, hey, we need you to come out and take a look at this, give us a determination of the amount of damage that was caused by each peril. Was it wind? Was it flood? What percentages? And what data is out there that makes that determination? So go into little details if you can on how you make that determination on the amount of damages and how you get that information. What are you specifically looking for so that when we're out there as an adjuster, we can make sure we're observing these things a little better and making sure we're providing some of the information back to you as the engineer so that you can make a quicker and faster determination. So give us a little insight on that, if you would, please.
Well, typically when you guys are going to get there before us, normally weeks or months before us. In this situation, it might be a little bit sooner for us to get out there, but you're still there ahead of us. So the more photographs that you can take in this situation of the surrounding area, show the foundation that's left in the surrounding area. What do the buildings look like around you that are still standing? What does the environment look like? A lot of times in that situation, like say in Mexico Beach, for instance, after Michael, it was weeks until we were able to get access. And by that time, emergency services had been in there clearing roads, bulldozers had been disturbing a lot of the evidence, pushing things around. And even in some lots, the buildings were removed. Whatever debris was left from the building had been removed. So all we got to look at is a cleared lot and a clean slab that may have had a few floor tiles stuck to it. That's it. So by looking at the surrounding buildings, the pile supported buildings that are still intact, you're able to determine, okay, well, those buildings were between us and the water. They're still here. So the water obviously didn't get up high enough to affect the structure above, say, 10 or 12 feet. So we have an idea of where the surge was at that point. Then by spiraling out from your particular lot, looking for clues. Is there scrape marks and marring on the tree trunks that are left, indicating floating debris impacted the tree at a certain level? Are there broken floor beams in those elevated houses that are still standing where floating debris impacted some of the floor beams of those houses and broke things? Are there pieces of marsh grass that are tucked into places on the framing where the wind wouldn't normally bring them, like behind the hurricane straps or around the bolts and into some of the nooks and crannies where the water's going to take that debris, not necessarily from the wind? Those are the things that we're looking at, and that'll give us an idea at the site of roughly how high the water was at that particular location. So then we can get an idea of, okay, the water was, say, 12 feet high or 15 feet high or what have you. The second piece to that puzzle, and this is where everybody struggles a little bit, because as adjusters, you guys want the information back as soon as possible to close your claim and get your customer their money. Well, we try to do that as fast as possible, but in this instance, we have to wait for the forensic weather forecasters to put together a package, a timeline to show what the wind speeds were for the storm event at a particular location, as well as what's the particular surge height at those particular times as well. And CompuWeather is the one that I use a lot. They produce a graph that basically looks like a giant bell curve. As the storm moves ashore, the wind speeds increase, the surge levels increase underneath, and you can have a timetable of when the water got to that particular spot, how deep the water was at a particular time, and then correlating that with what was the wind speed at that particular time as well. And based on that, you can knowing how the building was constructed, you can put together a reasonable and rational time frame of approximately how the building came apart and at what time, and then based on that information, what damage is from the wind and what damage is from the water. The hard part is that forensic forecast usually follows the storm event anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. It takes time to gather all the information that FEMA collects and all the different gauges that different universities put out. And there's a lag period of waiting for that information to be compiled for that weather report to be generated. And sometimes that will delay our reporting because we're waiting for that piece of the puzzle to finalize our version of what happened. And sometimes adjusters get frustrated of, well, why does it take so long? Well, we're relying on a third party to give us information, and sometimes it takes them a while to piece it together. The larger the storm, the wider the area, sometimes the longer it takes, but the give and take there is usually that information is more accurate because you have more gauges and more areas to pull from and more samples of data to collect to come up with that average of what happened.
So basically, you throw a dart at a dartboard. Half of it says flood, half of it says wind. You throw it out that, and then you get your percentage from there. Okay, I get it. That makes a lot of sense.
It's not quite a dartboard. You kind of hone in a little bit better. But I will tell you that looking at several of these over the years, that each storm has its own unique shape when you get those graphs. Michael was a very closed bell curve. It was very tight. It was a very fast-moving storm. Sally is a little bit flatter bell curve, and it was much more spread out because of the duration of the storm event. Katrina was, again, a little bit more condensed with a higher peak because of the winds and everything and moving at a pretty good clip. And it had a much higher flood elevation depending on where you were. But each storm has its own kind of unique personality. And each storm, as we found, has its own specific issue that the insurance company has to deal with.
Yes. Yeah, definitely on that. So you mentioned we're talking about Katrina. So I get a question that's kind of related to Katrina and Rita, for example. And so one of the questions that had came up is when you're dealing with a property that has multiple losses involved in that property, multiple floods that occur, maybe a couple weeks later, maybe one after the other. I mean, how do you make that determination of what is current and what is related to a prior loss? How do you go about looking at this information, and what background information would the adjuster need to provide an expert for making a confirmation or determination on that loss?
Well, if you're talking about, like, say, two specific hurricanes that make landfall very close together, I always use the example over here of Ivan and Dennis. In Pensacola, if we had a loss, if it was related to Hurricane Ivan, well, Ivan came ashore west of Pensacola. So the winds that would have affected Pensacola from Hurricane Ivan would have been in a counterclockwise fashion from the north and the east. Now, if that same loss location was affected by Dennis, say a year later, Dennis made landfall east of Pensacola. So in a counterclockwise fashion, the winds that would have affected the property from Dennis would have been from the south and the west. So based on the directionality of damage and knowing where the storms came ashore, you'd be able to sort out on the roof, say, well, the shingles on these slopes were from Ivan, the shingles from this slope would have been from Dennis, and be reasonably correct. As far as flood goes, if you have sequential flood events, as long as the first flood event was the highest flood event, typically you'd have multiple still water lines that you'd be able to measure. I had an instance out in Missouri years ago where Table Rock Dam the floodgates had opened several times. And the first time the house flooded 7 feet, 3 days later, the house flooded to 5 feet. And 4.5 days after that, it flooded to 3 feet. So in that case, when you walked inside, you had 3 distinct water lines you could measure each event. If that would have been the opposite and the last event would have been the highest, that would have definitely made it a lot more difficult. And because the events were so close together, no one was able to get out there in time to photograph the sequential floods. I was there between the second flood and the third flood. In fact, I was there during the second flood and got there literally minutes before the third flood and was able to photograph everything. But that's not always the case.
So it's basically almost a common sense approach as well. I mean,
yes.
When if you see obviously one high line and then there's a low line, we do. Yeah, it makes sense to have two different floods. And I guess from there, if you do have a 4-foot line and you had a 3-foot line, for example, in a house, how do you know which one? Well, you just answered that question for me. So we'll go on for that one. So, all right. So I actually have one more question. And then I think there's a few people online that have a few questions. So I have one more question that was asked originally. So from an adjuster, what should the adjuster expect from the expert? We know what you are looking for adjusters to do. So what will we expect? What an adjuster expect from the expert out in the field?
Typically, what we provide is we give you a report, or we should be giving you a report with concrete, substantial conclusions. It was caused by this, and here's our opinion was it was caused by X, and here's the supporting evidence of why we think it was caused by X. I get a lot of reports that I see coming through on the plaintiff side of things when we're doing a litigation work, where the engineer is not very confident, or they don't build a good case. You get a lot of these wishy-washy answers. Well, it might have been, it appeared to be, it could have been, or I can't rule out that this contributed to it. That's kind of an easy way out. I try to tell my guys and teach my guys that make an opinion and defend your position. If you feel that this is what happened, then support it with evidence that shows that's what happened. There are times when we can't make that definitive of a stand, and those are few and far between, but they do happen. The damage was consistent with this. However, by the time we got there, evidence was removed, the damage was repaired, the house caught fire and burned down. There's all kinds of different things that could happen. The owner closed the wall. They had completed repairs and finished the wall, and we couldn't see the framing inside. So those kind of things happen. But we still try to give you an opinion as to what happened, and then whether or not how strongly we can substantiate it would be based on the conditions that we see. But just know that a lot of times we can't make an opinion because we get there so late. Or I've got several now that I'm working on for Sally. We don't get to the site till 6 or 7 months later. The house has been fully repaired. The adjuster's pictures are less than stellar. And now the insurance company's relying on us to tell them what happened. Well, it's very difficult to talk about roof damage in a hurricane when there's no ceiling stains reported on the inside. There's no photographs of ceiling stains, and the adjuster didn't get on the roof, but now 6 months later, the roof's been replaced. So any evidence of that is gone. We have no proof one way or the other, but yet I've got to argue with the public adjuster of why he can or can't pay for he's not going to get paid for the roof.
Okay.
So, again, the more pictures and the better pictures you get, that makes life much easier for everybody.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. So it kind of goes back to one of our earlier questions as well. What you kind of need, the faster reporting. What do you need from the field, from the adjuster out there? And obviously, just like you point out again, the faster the adjuster gets the information, the correct information, the proper information to help to give you a full view of everything. Just like you used the example on the roof, without the adjuster climbing up on the roof and taking photographs, we don't know what damage are up there. So until the adjuster does a full investigation, regardless of what they were called out there to do. An example, maybe they just said there was some water in a crawl space. Well, obviously, one of the things as a judge we have to do, we need to look inside the house as well. Don't just look at the crawl space, look inside the house, do the full investigation, proper document that. And the faster we can get that information off to you, if needed, it sounds like this is the information you need to be able to properly document and more accurate and quality report on your end from an engineer. So again, we're a team. It's like us passing the basketball to you. The faster we pass to you, the quicker you can make a dunk. If we're delaying, at some point it may, somebody may intercept it or whatever, but the evidence obviously gets spoiled over a certain period of time. So we just have to make sure as an adjuster, we are seeing this potential need for an engineer and making sure we're getting that information out there as quickly and accurate as possible to approval and on to an engineering firm as well.
Also, Craig, when you're talking about the accurate information, keep in mind that a lot of times the file information that we get, particularly in a CAT event, the house is uninhabitable or gone, but the phone numbers provided in the file are the landline for the house that's no longer occupied or existing. So we get all that information to contact the insured to make an appointment to go visit, and we're calling a number that's disconnected or nobody's in the house because it's uninhabitable. So along with that accurate information, if you guys have the cell number or a good contact number for the insured, make sure you pass that along into the file, because that'll delay us getting out there, as well as we're trying to chase down the owner to get permission to visit the site, and we're calling a number that's in a house where nobody lives.
Makes a lot of sense. The longer the delay, the more of less of an opportunity there is for a full proper investigation. So I do have a question that came up on the chat box, and this kind of goes back to what you were talking about on the wind side. This is the wind side on replacement. So kind of clarify again. So, you go out there and the policyholder has claims there's damages to their pilings from the storm surge, but the pilings had been replaced prior to the adjuster's inspection. Sometimes the carrier respond back to us, say, if the damages are the damages repairable before the inspection, there's no need for an engineer. Do you think that the engineer still could be helpful in those cases where the work has already been done? Do you think there could be the assistance of an engineer at that point?
Well, I think if the work has been done prior to the engineer getting there, but after the adjuster was there, yes, depending on the adjuster's quality of photographs. Because we can look at the adjuster's photographs of the damaged area before repairs are done. We can still go and look at the area that repairs were done and be able to make a conclusion as to, yes, this was damaged by the event, or no, it wasn't. Then the next question that usually follows is, if the damage was caused by the event, is it covered or not? And then we have to get into, is it done properly for particular building codes?
And how accurate, just by going out photographs, how accurate is using an assessment, or how comfortable do you feel with an assessment, but just by looking at photographs?
It depends on, a lot of it depends on the quality of photographs, and a lot of it depends on the experience of the expert. Some of my folks that are a little bit less experienced, they struggle with going out on that limb too far. Some of the guys that have been doing this for 15, 20 years and have seen hundreds of buildings, they're a little bit more comfortable crawling out on that limb a little bit further and listening to some of those creaks and cracks.
Okay. Makes a lot of sense regarding that, because again, we go back to the proper need for documentation, the proper need to make sure that everything's in order when a report goes to an engineer in the field, that they have everything they need to be able to make an assessment. If it's been repaired or if it's been replaced or what, at least they have something to go by. But in a situation we go out and the work's already been done, is there anything at that point would be beneficial for an engineer? Is there anything that an engineer can do at that point, or we just we're stuck with the fact that the work's been done before we even did the inspection?
That's a hard one if the work's already been done before you all get there, because unless the owner has photographs or the contractor took photographs, and even then, a lot of those photographs sometimes can be suspect because they show a crack in a beam, but it's so close. I don't know if it's a crack in the beam that was under their house, the neighbor's house. It was a crack in a beam over at the bank 2 blocks away. It's very difficult to discern yes or no, depending on, again, the quality of the photographs. And even if the photographs exist, sometimes contractors, if they're familiar with insurance work, they will document their work with photographs. Sometimes that's a challenge getting a hold of those, but the homeowner sometimes takes pictures. Again, with phones and everything nowadays, I don't know of anybody that doesn't have a camera within arm's reach 100% of the time.
Yeah.
So it would be a hard sell to me that, we don't have any pictures. Really? Because you have 19 cell phones and all these people around. What, nobody snapped a picture to put on Snapchat? I find that a little awkward.
Exactly. So that makes a so I guess when we reach a threshold, we go out and we don't have the information. There's obviously, as an adjuster, there's obviously other avenues that we could look for, and we could work together to see if there's other information out there that could be provided, and then from your perspective, be able to pull that information and possibly do an assessment at that point. So I have another question that was brought up, and this is something that sometimes happens, sometimes don't, but I kind of want to get your opinion on this from your perspective, from an engineer. So is it important, or is it needed, or is there any benefit for the adjuster to make sure they actually meet with an engineer in the field in times during when you're inspecting? Is there something out there that would help benefit your inspection process if an adjuster was able to meet you out there in the field during your inspection?
The best thing that I've seen with the adjuster being in the field with you is at the end of the inspection, the two of you can have a little talk, and you'll be able to, the engineer will be able to provide the adjuster with some verbal conclusions, sometimes depending on the site. So that helps more the adjuster continue the claim process on his end. Sometimes it's beneficial, particularly in a situation like we were just discussing, where maybe the adjuster was there when everything was broken and now everything is fixed and the engineer is there. That would provide a little bit better story, so to speak, with a kind of a third party that has no skin in the game, so to speak. Because if you listen to the homeowner tell you, or the contractor that did the work tell you what was repaired, it could be, oh, the whole wall, it was terrible, blah, 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 where the adjuster's like, well, no, really, there was just a water stain under this window. They didn't necessarily need to gut the entire room and redo it.
Makes a lot of sense. And on large losses, probably very beneficial for the adjuster to be out there as well, kind of
Yes.
walk through and be a part of a larger, maybe a commercial loss. So, yeah.
Yeah, like for instance, like a hotel that has roof damage. Oh, we're claiming 300 rooms on the top floor were all damaged and had to be gutted. Well, no, it was only like 16 over here that were an issue.
The policyholders never exaggerate damages, Eric. You know that.
Oh, I know. Neither do public adjusters, Craig.
A half inch of water in a building, and when the report gets filed, it's 5 feet. So yeah, we know that.
Oh yeah.
So, all right. I don't see we have any more questions on the chat box. I think everything's been asked, and we're getting close to our time limit anyway. So, Eric, again, thank you for participating. Like I said, we wanted to do something a little different, and this is a great idea to do this question and answer session instead of just, we could go back and forth and generate some. And we're going back. We have some questions being generated from the audience as well, the participants. So that's great to be able to answer some of the questions live and get some feedback. And I think one of the things that we'll take away from this, to recap, is it's obviously we work together. We're a team. Regardless if you're out there on every single software claim that is handled, it might be 1 out of 50 that we actually call an engineer out on and have somebody go out there. But working together as a team, we have to remember as an adjuster that this information that we're out there, and when we're doing our investigation, we're thinking about that in the background. What do I need to get so that the engineer can do their job accurately, faster, and just have a quality report that comes back to us? Because one of the things we don't like as an adjuster, I'm sure you don't like it as well as an engineer, is having to, report comes in and we look at it and we go, I don't understand what he means. What's he talking about? He didn't look at any half the stuff I was looking at. So
Right.
that's something we definitely want to avoid. And the way we do that as adjusters is by making sure we're given all the information we need to you, the expert in the field, so that if there is a issue where the repairs have already been done, or there's an issue where it took a couple of weeks to get in touch with the policyholder, you can go back and look at all the information we took and the documentation we provided, and hopefully at that point be able to make a better assessment on your end and a faster assessment, unless there's obviously a total loss. Then we obviously know from our perspective why there is a delay in getting this information. It's not really the engineer's delay. It is the delay of getting it from a third party, because we don't want to make, as an adjuster, we don't want to make the assumption that it's wind or if it's water, unless it's very, very clear. But when it's kind of muddy, if you want to call it in a sense, we're not really clear what took place, what percentage of houses from damage from wind, what percentage of damage from flood in the hurricane situation. Then obviously we're relying on you, the engineer, and obviously relying on another expert to help us give us a better determination. Because that's one thing we ran into after Michael, was getting in a situation where you go out and the house is gone, and then as you're writing your estimate, trying to gather the information, and maybe trying to reach out to the wind adjuster, you discover that the wind adjuster had already paid all the damages, had paid full value of the house. You're like, okay, what part was wind, what part was flood? Because we owe. for a portion of that loss. They don't owe 100% of it because obviously there's some damages out there, but that was a different, unique situation. And that's where we need to make sure as adjusters, we're getting that information to you so you can properly do your investigations well into that and give us a better, clear, defined percentages across the board. So,
well, and the photographs are so critical too from the beginning, because a lot of times we'll get the question 6-7 months down the road, well, what damage was caused by the storm and what damage was caused as a result of lack of mitigation on the owner's part? And without having, I can go there 6-7 months later and take pictures of, oh, look at all the mold, look at all the damage to this, the drop ceiling, sheetrock and all that. But not knowing, well, maybe it looked like that after the storm. I have no idea. I wasn't here 6 months ago, but y'all were. So now, oh, it was just a stain the size of a skillet on the ceiling, and now the whole room's fell down. So that helps as well to be able to sort those kind of issues out.
Yeah, that definitely is valuable. So making sure that we're giving that information out there. So, all right, Erik, we'll wrap it up. I really greatly appreciate your time again for participating in this, and everybody that was on the call today greatly that you were able to participate and listen. We always get some good insight into some different topics that we throw out there, and just get a different perspective from, like today, we got a perspective from an engineer, what we need, what we're looking for. It's not always about the coverages. It's about how we can do the job better, how we can do it faster, more efficient. And, it benefits everybody across the board. It benefits the policyholder, it benefits you as the adjuster, the engineer, the carrier. It benefits everybody in the long run. That's what we look for, is more efficiency and more accuracy in what we do. And so by participating in this session today, you're getting some more ideas. And some of the stuff that you looked at or you heard today, you might be familiar with. You might have already done it. You might have already, oh yeah, we already do that. But there's always that little opportunity out there to pick up a new piece, to pick up a new practice and be able to implement that. And one of them, like we talked about today, we picked up is to making sure that we are giving everything possible to an expert so that they can do their job more accurately and more efficiently, up to the point where right there, that threshold where we're not making coverage determination, but we're giving them all the tools they need to be able to make that proper determination more efficiently and quickly. So, and Erik, again, I want to just say thank you from everybody, and y'all have a great day, and we'll talk to everybody again soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Erik.